Okay, so today we're diving into the U.S. national debt,
Okay.
and you sent over some research,
Right.
including this video about who the U.S. actually owes money to,
Uh-huh.
and it's got me thinking: does the U.S. really owe trillions of dollars to like evil villains or something?
Hmm.
Let's unpack this, shall we?
Well, it's a common misconception that the U.S. owes most of its debt to rival nations or some shadowy figures lurking in the background.
Right, right.
The truth is far more interesting, I would say.
Okay, so spill the tea. Who does the U.S. owe all this money to?
To understand that, we first need to grasp how U.S. debt actually works.
Okay.
It all boils down to these things called treasury bonds.
Treasury bonds.
These are essentially IOUs issued by the U.S. government.
Like borrowing a few bucks from a friend.
Exactly. The government uses these bonds to borrow money from various entities, individuals, companies, even other countries,
Right.
promising to pay it back with interest
Yep.
after a certain period. This makes treasury bonds a relatively safe and stable investment,
Gotcha.
which is why they're so popular.
So it's more like investing than owing someone money.
In a way, yes.
But who are these big-time investors? Is it like China sitting on a pile of these IOUs?
You'd be surprised. It turns out a whopping 70% of U.S. debt is owned domestically.
Whoa, 70%. So the U.S. mostly owes money to that itself.
That's right.
Wow.
Around 33% is held by U.S. investors,
Okay.
companies, banks, pension funds, and even individuals like you and me.
Right.
Another 12% is held by the Federal Reserve,
Federal Reserve.
our central bank.
Okay, so what about the remaining 27%?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, boy.
This portion is held by the U.S. government itself,
What?
government agencies like Social Security,
Gotcha.
by treasury bonds, essentially lending money to themselves.
Wait, so if the government is its own biggest lender, does that mean the national debt isn't as big a problem as we often hear it is?
Whoa.
Help me wrap my head around this.
It's definitely complex. While this internal debt doesn't pose the same risks as owing money to external creditors,
Right.
it still has implications.
Okay.
For example, some economists argue that this type of internal borrowing can contribute to inflation over the long term.
I see.
It's a topic with a lot of nuances.
Okay, so maybe not as simple as I thought.
Yeah.
What about the remaining 30%?
Right.
Who are the foreign investors in this whole debt equation?
The largest foreign holders of U.S. debt are China and Japan,
China and Japan. Okay.
followed by smaller portions held by countries like Brazil, Ireland, and the U.K.
But isn't relying so heavily on borrowing risky?
Well,
What happens if these countries suddenly decide they want their money back?
that's a great question. It highlights the importance of global financial stability.
Yeah.
These countries aren't lending to the U.S. out of the goodness of their hearts.
Right.
They're doing it because they benefit from it.
Okay.
Holding U.S. debt helps these countries maintain a favorable exchange rate with the dollar, which makes their exports cheaper for U.S. consumers and their reserves more stable.
So it's all a carefully calculated dance between different countries' financial interests.
Exactly. It's a global game of interdependence.
The whole debt ceiling thing keeps coming up in the news.
Yes.
Where does that fit into all of this?
The debt ceiling.
Yeah.
It's essentially a legal limit set by Congress on how much debt the U.S. Treasury can issue.
Okay.
Think of it like a credit limit on your credit card.
So if the debt ceiling is hit and the government can't issue more bonds,
Right.
what happens to those investors who are expecting their money back?
Yeah.
Does this impact the value of the bonds?
It absolutely can.
Okay.
Reaching the debt ceiling can create uncertainty and potentially even trigger a financial crisis. If the U.S. government can't borrow money to meet its financial obligations,
Right.
it risks defaulting on its debt,
Right.
which could have catastrophic consequences for the global economy. This is why raising the debt ceiling is often a contentious political issue.
This is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
The U.S. government is essentially its own biggest creditor, but even that has implications.
Right.
And then we have these foreign investors
Yeah.
all playing a part in this complex web of global finance.
It certainly highlights the interconnectedness of the global economy and the crucial role the U.S. plays in it.
So the big takeaway is that the U.S. debt situation isn't as straightforward as it might seem.
Fairly not.
It's not about good guys and bad guys,
No.
but a complex web of financial relationships and strategic decision-making.
Exactly.
This really changes my whole perspective on the national debt.
It's a fascinating subject with a lot of nuance.
Now that we've unpacked who actually holds the U.S. debt,
Right.
I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.
Okay.
Does this knowledge change your perspective on government spending, economic policies, or even the national debt itself?
Mm.
Food for thought.
Food for thought.
That's it for our deep dive today.
See you next time.
See you next time.
See ya.
Bye-bye.